All right. So yeah, I'm Georgia, and when I got asked to keynote this, I thought, I would give a talk about, maybe, how I felt about security or the community or whatever. And then Jason Street, who is not here, he's at, I guess, GurCon now, called me and said he was going to do that last week at SkyDogCon. And I just assumed that Adrian Crenshaw was going to be filming it so it would be out and everyone would have seen it, so there was no point. Plus, I guess Chris Nickerson gave that talk yesterday too, so I'm kind of glad I didn't bother to write it. So, okay, obviously I'm not funny because that's about as funny as it's going to get right there. So, number one, I really hate these slides. They were actually written, me and a business person wrote them together, and after spending some time in the business world, I think I may be allergic to the business world after it, so I'm not sure. I kind of came up in the security community, right? I mean, I know you guys, a lot of you guys are more developer focused, which, having built a product now and then had a developer leave and then stuff stopped working, I have a lot more respect for you guys now. People who do secure development, you're the coolest people ever, and if you want a job that pays absolutely no money, come talk to me. I also am out of business cards. I went to an event last week and realized I was out of business cards, but then forgot about it, so I'm obviously not a business person at all. All right, so let's kind of talk about, I guess the future of security, the way I see it. Maybe I'm just kidding myself because I feel like I've been saying this for a long time, and yet, other security people are still like, what does your product do again? Burn. All right, so yeah, this talk is, basically it's 10 years since the iPhone 1 came out. Has security caught up? That was a catchy business title. So yeah, we're gonna talk about enterprise cybersecurity, which is so far removed from any form of security I had ever seen in the security community. In the security community, we're all about, okay, here's this thing, and we busted it, and we ran all around the enterprise, and all this stuff. But then, you actually go to a real enterprise, and they're like, yeah, we have to check this box that said we did security. And so that's your enterprise security. So realizing that that's what I'm up against, and that's, you guys as developers are probably up against as well, has really, I don't know, kind of made me had a nervous breakdown in a way that, maybe security isn't that cool after all. We'll talk about, the modern reality, the risks we're now faced with, and what we're gonna do about it, or, at least what I'm trying to do about it, what I think we should do about it, as developers, as security professionals, as business people, what we're gonna do with this new idea of the enterprise that is, I go to a lot of pitch events now. I'm not used to speaking for 50 minutes anymore. I speak for 7 minutes. I say, my company is awesome, and here's some made up numbers about revenue that doesn't exist. Invest in us. That's what I say. And that's great, right? Well, sort of. But I go to these pitch events, and there's other security companies there, and they all say, basically, our product or our service or our this or our box or our app, or what have you, if you install it, it's going to solve all your security problems. And I see this as a security person, and I'm like, but there's no way you can solve all of the security problems. I don't believe that exists. The Win Schwartzout was telling me this stuff about math, calculus and differential equations and stuff that theoretically solved all of security. So I'll give him that. He's a lot smarter than me. But in general, I think in terms of solving the enterprise risk, the device risk, the application risk, I don't think that it's coming anytime, in my lifetime per se. So I see these products and these services, and what the real problem is, what's really got my beef, is that they keep getting clients to investment. And I understand why, because why would you want to invest in a security program where you have to keep investing more and more stuff and time and effort on things that don't actually seem to give you any payback whatsoever, when you could just put this box on your network and then magically all your problems go away. And this is, I think, how these big breaches are happening deep down. I don't think it's people, just being stupid like we in the community like to say, oh, those people didn't patch. I think the real issue is that we've got security companies saying we can fix all your security problems. They buy the box. I assure you that all those big breaches had every one of those big shiny boxes who told them they no longer needed to patch their systems. They no longer needed to do password management or anti-phishing behavior awareness or whatever. I should know this. Behavior management, I guess, is the word. And thus they thought they were safe, and that's what their vendors told them, so why should they not believe it? And that's why they got breached, just because they weren't doing their in-depth security program, because their vendors told them they didn't need to, that their boxes would solve all the problems. But then it gets a little bit more complicated. Okay, let's say just for I'm a penetration tester by, that was my first job. That's kind of what I still do to pay the bills when everything else sucks. And I break into the enterprise all the time. I know you've got shitty passwords. I know that you've got Windows XP. I saw it at the Dulles airport on the way over here, actually. I know you've got missing patches. I know you've got, old database stuff. I know you've got it. I know I can break into your internal enterprise, just forget about it. And if any of you guys do penetration testing or application security testing, you probably feel the same way. Everything you test has cross-site request forgery, or it has stored cross-site scripting that turns into, session hijacking. You're just seeing this stuff over and over and over again, and it's why do I even bother? But it just got way more complicated, and not just, it has been for a while. But typically when I, whether it's, me going in directly to a client, I'm a small company, I don't, exactly get everyone's attention per se, or, subcontracting through a bigger company, however it is, I end up working with a company. Ultimately this picture, which is totally stolen from Cisco, which you probably realize from the blue boxes, this is what people want to test. They want to test this idea of a network. And there may be you can't, I certainly can't read it because I don't have my glasses on, because that's my trick for not being nervous, is that I actually can't see you now at all. As I take my glasses off before I speak. But this is the network, right? It might be off-site places and things and whatnot, but it's this flat idea of a network. It's flat idea of, we can monitor the network. Especially troubling is that we can watch the perimeter. A very high percentage of our security is put at the perimeter. Yeah, there's some endpoint stuff now that, has varying rates of success of actually solving anything. You probably, saw the thing at DEF CON Black Hat where, they said that Cylance stops Mimikatz, and then somebody put Mimikatz on the computer that was doing that demo. And Cylance did in fact not catch it. So, there are host-based products certainly, but a lot of our security is still being kept at the perimeter. And, we have this idea that all of our security stuff needs to be at the perimeter because all of our data has to cross the perimeter. Before we get data loss, it has to cross, our firewall, our intrusion detection system, whatever our controlled perimeter is. The problem is that's not really the case anymore. You look at, say, this thing that's got, a shattered screen, and, I've got a couple more of them in my bag, and tablets, and, even some of the laptops now, and your smartwatches. I saw somebody get on the plane with their smartwatch. I really didn't know you could do that. It doesn't really surprise me, but it was funny at the time. It seemed just slapping your wrist. I thought he had an implant for a minute. You see those people in security who open their RFID doors with an implant. It was actually just his watch. But anyway, you've got your car, certainly, if you've got one nicer and newer than mine, mine's not vulnerable to anything except, maybe not turning on. But most of your newer cars basically have a phone inside of them to call home, and those sorts of things don't really cross the perimeter. And that's where having, all of your security sitting at the perimeter becomes a problem. And it's not just, a mobile problem per se. You're also looking at I like to say, though it was a reporter that gave me this idea because he asked me the question. He was asking about mobile, and then he asked about cloud, and he asked if like cloud services were basically the same thing, and it was like, yeah, I totally put them in the same like bank account, the mobile and the cloud issues, because once again, it's outside of your perimeter. I mean, you're getting on Salesforce.com, you're getting on social media, you're getting on all these other sites that you've got Jira, you've got whatever it is that like builds stuff that I always forget about. Jenkins, that's it. See, becoming a DevOps person, but not very quickly. So you've got all these ways that your enterprise data is potentially missing that perimeter entirely. So you've got, your mobile modems, you've got near field communication for like payment stuff, you've got Bluetooth, you've got it going up into web applications for cloud services, you've got it wandering around the globe. This is just Austin, but people go to China and Russia and other places that the network infrastructure may not necessarily be so nice. So you've got all these possibilities where this doesn't really hold up anymore, and yet this is the kind of security testing we're doing. You talk to pretty much like any pen test shop, vulnerability assessment shop, anything, and they're looking at what are your vulnerabilities on your Windows boxes, your Linux boxes, your Wi-Fi. Can we break into your Wi-Fi? Are your passwords insecure? MSO 8067, Eternal Blue. But we're totally missing all of these issues, and it's not a complete picture of enterprise security without it. It makes, I guess, a good report to say that, yeah, we popped, all your systems because we popped, this old box that was in a corner that you forgot about that wasn't patched, and that got us onto your domain, and then we got domain admin. But then when you fix those problems, you've still got these problems, and, I know it is a good question to say that, if we can't fix like MSO 8067 or, now Eternal Blue, if we can't fix that, how are we going to fix this? So maybe I'm overreaching here about like what we're capable of as a security industry, but I'm at least trying to help. So, I have this kind of idea of the threat model of mobile, and it's a lot like a traditional device. I mean, you think, laptop or desktop, you've got, your remote exploits, the super duper MSO 8067, Eternal Blue, the really scary stuff. Though you've got a lot more like client-side exploitation. You've got a lot more, somebody has to open something nasty in their browser, or their PDF viewer, or, in this case, in an application like Maps, or again, a PDF viewer. Then certainly you've got, the idea of, social engineering. We'll talk more about social engineering later. I've always kind of ragged on social engineering as like, what people who aren't cool enough to write exploits do. But having been in security for longer now, I realize that that's a really dumb way to look at it, since, social engineering works so well. So yeah, we'll talk a little more about that later, but certainly I think the phishing issue on mobile is worse than ever, and once again, we have completely failed to stop phishing on email. It's the number one way that people get attacked is through some sort of email phishing vector, and now with mobile, we've got all of these additional ways that people can be phished. So again, maybe it's just too hard of a problem to solve. I don't know. Welcome to my security nervous breakdown. Can we solve this problem at all? But the real problem with mobile, I think, and when I say mobile, again, I'm thinking, all of the tablets and things as well, the IoT devices, I kind of, lump them all together. The problem is that they're just a little bit too secure for the old paradigm to work. Because again, I made the joke about Cylance and Mimikatz, but these host-based malware detection, intrusion prevention, threat detection, whatever they want to call themselves today, whatever the buzzword is that people are buying, they do, provide a service. My mom loves to download online games. I don't know where the hell she gets them from, but she's always got this new game, and every time I end up looking at a computer, it's just like a complete disaster of malware. Like, not the super scary, hard industrial malware, but like the kind of stuff that an antivirus program would catch. And it does catch, you know, she's got the McAfee or whatever. I don't know which vendor she's got. But anyway, you know, it pops up and it says, you know, this is bad. So, I mean, those things do provide value. The problem is that, you know, they basically took that exact same model. And why not? Because really, this is the one thing I had to learn from moving from being basically just a security researcher who was doing this to get on stages and be famous and be on television to, you know, being a business person, that the real goal is not to be cool. The real goal is to make money, right? So if people are gonna buy it, who cares if it doesn't work? All you have to do is convince them that it will. So I totally understand why, you know, when mobile became a thing, it was like, okay, let's take all of the security stuff that we had on traditional devices, like, you know, a Windows PC or a Mac or what have you, and let's put them on phones, let's put them on tablets, and then when IoT started happening, let's put them on IoT too. Because then, you know, you've got one person with a laptop, but then they've got a phone and a tablet too, or maybe they've even got two phones because they've got a corporate one and a personal one. Look at all that extra licensing. So I totally understand why like every host detection thing ever made a mobile version for both Android and iPhone, and for a while Windows Phone and BlackBerry as well, but not so much now. But the problem is that basically the phone architecture is just secure enough that it makes that stuff useless. You know, we're used to being able, you know, on the Windows machine, you know, to this day, you know, in administrator mode, you know, we can scan and look for viruses and things. We can look for things that look weird. We can look for things in memory, whatever. You know, it can run, you know, in the kernel. You can't really do that on a phone or any mobile device really, you know, without like jailbreaking or rooting, which, you know, causes its own set of yes and no's. So basically, really, the only way I think to solve like mobile security problems is it's gonna have to be baked into the device itself, which, you know, you guys are developers, right? I mean, it's, you know, basically like a rule of thumb that you don't test your own stuff. You know, it's true in security. I know it's true in development as well, because no matter how smart you are, it's like, you know, proofreading your, you know, I was supposed to talk about that. Right, okay, so there's 2 copies of my book that are in the silent auction, and they're signed, and usually I like throw them off the stage, but apparently you kind of get in trouble for that, because it's like a fire hazard or something. So you have to do the auction, but it's, you know, for a great cause. So there are 2 of them, so if you want to learn about penetration testing, how did I get on that? Oh, right. So if you're like proofreading your own book, no matter like how smart you are at grammar, you won't be able to find your mistakes. It's kind of the same thing. But, and I mean, there's vendors that are trying to do this. I mean, you've got Samsung Knox, you've got, you know, Apple tries to do a lot like baked in, certainly with security. I mean, I'm not saying that, I'm actually saying that the security of the devices is great. I'm just saying that the security of the devices is not and never will be perfect. As with any other device, there's always going to be vulnerabilities. There's always going to be social engineering vectors where the user is able to undermine the security. But I mean, in the worst case, you've got a security app on the device that periodically wakes up and asks itself whether it's a virus and then goes back to sleep. You think I'm kidding? I'm really not. That's like what a lot of them do. Apple actually kicked a lot of like antiviruses off their store for this reason, because they realized that, you know, they weren't actually able to do their job with the mobile architecture. So, you know, that's, and yet, you know, people are still buying it. So, you know, who cares, right? Certainly they don't. I mean, it seems like the security vendors don't think that they actually have to do a good job. And why should they, as long as people keep buying? But I mean, never have we seen devices that are quite so connected. I mean, you know, I'm not that old, but like, you know, I remember like, you know, when I was young, it was like, you know, the AOL and whatever, and you know, you've got the like modem thing singing, and it takes forever to log on. And then, then you get wireless internet, and then you don't trip over the damn cord anymore. And it's like, this is exciting. But of course, people that are older than me, remember punch cards and things. So I should probably not make jokes about fast internet around, people who might be a little older than me. Actually, I have no idea, because again, I can't see. But never have there been devices that are so connected. And again, kind of going back to this idea of the stuff we're doing with these devices now and the stuff we think is a good idea. Again, when I go to pitch contests, it's not always all security people. Sometimes it's I'm gonna make your phone into your doctor, and I'm gonna make people be able to diagnose you through this case that will take your blood pressure, and it'll do all the, and it'll take your blood, and I'm just what? And people think this is a great idea, and absolutely, in the name of progress, let's totally forget about the security issues and just absolutely make everything as scary as humanly possible, this device. Every time it comes out and people are so enraged that oh, your television is spying on you, and it's yeah, who didn't see that coming? Come on. Yeah, I mean, I guess privacy is dead, but seriously, this thing in your pocket, or this thing, in your car, or this thing in your home, if you think about it, it's fucking scary. Really, in terms of the amount of data it is able to see and process and, send off site without telling you. It speaks all these different languages. I mean, I guess everybody knows that, Google Maps and all these places keep all your old GPS coordinates so they know everywhere that you've been. I mean, I've always said it would be a really great time to break into my house now because I'm not there. Naturally they speak Wi-Fi, cellular, near field communication, Bluetooth, all these other, and power adapters as well. I mean, I guess, this had its day as well, that power adapters can be malicious, but now, with in the airport, I see these charging stations, and they've got every adapter imaginable, and you give them money and they charge your device, and I'm just I gotta put out some of those. Yeah, I gotta put out some of those and see what I get. I'm always just too good of a person. I see all these malware authors and stuff making a lot of money, and I'm totally broke all the time. And I'm if I could just go bad for just a few days, write something that wasn't completely shitty, put it out there, make some money, and then go back. It would be okay. I could use that to finance my company. How is that for non-dilutive funding? Okay, I see what it takes to make you guys laugh. All right, and then it gets worse because then you get this ecosystem, because I said that all the host-based stuff moved on to mobile so they could get more licenses. Well, all of the network-based stuff did too, naturally. We got this thing called mobile device management, really, and there's slides for all of this. And then they changed their name to enterprise mobility management without basically changing anything at all. It was I guess Gartner came up with something else that MDM stood for, mid-range data, whatever. You'd have to look it up. Yeah, Gartner Magic Quadrants was a real eye-opening experience to me, that you could basically pay to have someone say that your security product was awesome. And that was all you had to do. And then everybody, when they're okay, let's go get some security products, they get the Gartner Magic Quadrant, and it's what's in the top right? And it's oh, the people who paid to be there. I give up, guys. I give up. If this is what security is, I'm gonna go do something else, seriously. But anyway, you've got your mobile app stores on site, and you've got your enterprise mobility management, and you've got your, intrusion detection and intrusion prevention that now, say that they're also looking for things for mobile. Your vulnerability assessment kind of tools say they are too, but again, they're generally sitting at the perimeter and listening on the wire. So unless, your attacks happen to be going over Wi-Fi, which if I was a sophisticated attacker is not what I would do with a device that can do all these other things that aren't being monitored at all, that's not what I would do. But again, I'm not an attacker, but obviously I'd be a pretty good one if I did. So, I mean, we've also got this entire mobile ecosystem. And yes, all of those things are on the domain too. So when you are doing your penetration test and you get your domain admin credentials, yes, you can log into all these boxes too. Just, as a side note, if any of you guys do penetration testing, yeah, once you get your domain admin, you've got, mobile capabilities as well by logging into these things, which have, access to the devices. So anyway, just a side note. So I said we'd talk a little bit more about social engineering, and again, I have always kind of given the finger to social engineering. I thought it was lame. Naturally, I would do it when my customers wanted it, Metasploit Pro or FishMe or, whatever vendor, and, send it out and get it done. And here's the people who clicked on this really stupid thing I sent you that basically says, hey, this is a phishing email. Do not click on this. 95% success rate. What do you do with something like that? If the only way we have to deal with social engineering issues is by doing security training, and we do security training, and then we send out a message that says this is a phishing email, don't click on it, and we still get, okay, maybe 95 success was a high, but I mean, we get a fair number of people who still click the link. Because that's a really simple test. I mean, certainly there is no one in the world, no one in the world, no one in the connected world of, IT that you could not write a social engineering campaign that wouldn't get them. Basically, one of my guys who does PR for me sometimes said a really good quote, and I wrote it on the inside of a bus once. That actually makes sense. I did this thing, it was called Road Trip Nation, and they did students trying to learn cybersecurity, and they had this big green bus that they let me drive, and I kind of wrecked it. But they had all the people that they interview write something, and I wrote, links are meant to be clicked, because they are, that's kind of the point, right? Links are meant to be clicked. So I guess I hit back, and now I hit 2 forward. There we go. All right, so like I said, there's no way that I would certainly fall for it. I think about it, and it's oh, you got to sign this document or else you're not going to get paid or something like that, DocuSign or something. But it's what are you going to do? You need the money, you got to sign the document. So naturally, you open it, it opens in your browser PDF viewer extension, which, no doubt, as they say with WebKit, it's basically, a backdoor with a rendering function. All right, that's not funny. But then, with mobility, we get all these other ways that people can be social engineered beyond email. But even with email, you think about what people learn in, security awareness training. They learn hover over the link, or make its real link, or all these things that you're supposed to do. Which, how do you do that on an Android or an iPhone? Or you don't. So it really doesn't line up. And then you've got text message. We're starting to see some, certainly in the wild we're seeing it, and certainly a little bit from some of the assessments. We're seeing text message social engineering attacks. But there's also all these other ways, like QR codes. At RSA this past year, you had to scan a QR code to get in. QR codes are finally taking off. In one of the assessments that I did, I'm allowed to say this, they were a reference pilot, but basically they shared a building with, I guess it was Avon Payne, downtown in DC. So we made a poster that was a discount coupon for Avon Payne and put it in their break room, and it had a QR code on it. And sure enough, people were glad to scan it and even download our application that had some, extra features to get their, $5 off or whatever by scanning the QR code, because, it looks like that. Who knows where it goes? And then, you've also got all these different messengers, WhatsApp, Signal, Telegram, all the Facebook, Twitter, DM. and especially, ones like WhatsApp and Telegram and these that, claim themselves to be secure. I think a lot of people take their security awareness down a level because they're expecting a certain level of security. But if you're able to send, again, a link of some kind for people to click on, it becomes entirely, the same situation. Steal people's credentials, install stuff on their system, exploit them through client-side attacks, what have you, the same sorts of things that are working so successfully through, traditional email attacks against traditional devices. Now you've just got all these other ways that people are not being trained, so your, success rate goes up and up. And then I guess the the real question comes in, like, what is the impact of all this? Like, who cares if you get on my phone? Like, okay, you get to steal my pictures from last night at the speaker party, which I guess the speaker party was the night before. I don't know. I didn't even go. I wasn't here yet. I was on an airplane yesterday. So you get to steal my pictures, you get to steal my personal stuff, what have you. Okay, maybe you get to like steal corporate emails, location information, like who cares? I mean, you can also control the device. Because, when you get a text message from like number 1234, you might not click on it, but if it actually comes from your boss's number or your IT director's number or someone you're used to getting, say two-factor authentication text messages from, if you're used to that, you're much more likely to click on it naturally, so you can, attack the chain of trust by, once you get on somebody's device, you can certainly make that device do things for you. I have on here post on Twitter. I guess, this is kind of an old slide deck because, our president has proved that nothing you write on Twitter will actually ruin your reputation. So I take it back. Posting on Twitter will not ruin the reputation of your company entirely. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's just a president thing, I don't know. Record video or audio of the user and send it off-site. I mean, this is, again, it's just, you see the webcam on the Mac, it getting hacked, and then, people posting videos of, their Trojan computers that they've hacked, same thing on the mobile devices. This gets scary when I think that, executives and such, start to take this seriously. They actually listen to me for 2 seconds. When I say that, because, they have, closed door meetings and they have their mobile devices with them. But, if the wrong people were listening, insider trading and all that. Certainly privilege escalation, because, as we, looked at with this guy, security is kind of baked into the device. So being able to break out of, whatever security it has in terms of, sandboxes with the mobile device management or, like on-device stuff like Knox or, whatever they have in terms of security, being able to break out around it, which, again, it comes back to the traditional device. It's, you come in as an unprivileged user, you want to get, root or administrator, or kernel, or whatever, depending on the device, same kind of thing here. But where I think it gets really interesting is pivoting, which it always, again, did with the traditional devices as well. You get onto somebody's workstation and turn that into, say, domain admin, or getting into the database with the credit cards, or what have you. Same sort of deal with the mobile phones. I mean, a lot of places, they really just put like the Wi-Fi password on the whiteboard. You might be surprised how many of medium-sized businesses do this. You've got, a lot of your bigger companies are VPNing in, so that's, a little bit more secure. But if, I'm the root of the device, and then now I can, basically click go and VPN in and get, some access to the network. It really depends, on the network in particular, and how it's set up. Certainly if you've got, like our first picture, basically, this completely flat network, it would be a disaster to have a mobile device that has, malware on it that is controlled by someone else that is inside of this network and can go wherever they want, and no doubt find other vulnerabilities they can exploit to pivot around it and do the same thing you would do, if you got somebody's workstation. If the devices end up on their own network or some sort of guest network, certainly that's better, but you've still got possibilities. I went way too far. So naturally, we've got to fix this problem, and people realize that it's a problem, sort of. So yeah, we're going to fix it. We talked a little bit about the mitigations already, but these are kind of what we're doing about this security issue right now. So we've got isolation, mobile device management. Like I said, mobile device management became enterprise mobility management with very little change at all. Mobile application management, which is currently, I guess, the gold standard of what you're supposed to do. And I mean, you guys are application developers. I mean, do you think you're ever going to be able to make it so that a blacklist or a whitelist ever works ever? I mean, I did this interview with a reporter, and it was, I guess, about somebody had, one of the app testing companies, naturally in their own interest, they would put out a report that said that these are the apps that are bad that we block. And it's okay, so you get rid of these 10 apps. What about the 10,000 more that come to take their place tomorrow? I just don't think it's something that works. But anyway, we'll talk about that. And of course, our old favorite, endpoint protection, our antivirus, threat management, whatever. It works with my mom's online games. All right, I went 2 slides. This is not working. Maybe I should not have kept this thing. All right, so system isolation. I mean, you probably saw a lot of this, when BlackBerry was still cool. People would have their, Android and iPhone, and then they'd have their corporate BlackBerry. I mean, some people still do this. You have your corporate phone that you have no rights to whatsoever. It's purely for corporate. You're not allowed to do anything with it. You don't have admin on it or anything. You can't install anything on it. You absolutely hate it and drop it in the toilet. And then you've got your personal phone, but not many places do this anymore, except for governments do it a lot. Then you've got a lot more of what you see is dual profile devices. So it's, the corporate owned, personally enabled, more, letters to remember, CYOE or whatever. That was wrong, PE. So that's, what we're trying to do with Knox and things like that. And then, I mean, I can kind of tell you this because I won't go into any details. And it wasn't me, it was someone I used to work with that worked on kind of I guess what BlackPhone was trying to do with the Android, except they were trying to do it in the government, and they basically had 2 different phones inside of it, and it got to be about as big as the T1 calculator, and it was really hot and it kind of blew up. So it wasn't really, I mean, they still have stuff like this, but that was the early model of the dual profile device. But I mean, it works with varying success. I mean, certainly, if you can break out of your sandbox space or your, memory protected space, into the lower layers and then come back out on the other side, and there's always going to be a certain amount of risk with that, which was, I guess, why they were trying to literally make 2 different processors, 2 different memories, etc. I mean, that would be the gold standard, right? Where it's literally using different architecture, but though I guess we seem to change what we want, right? We want it to be super, super small, and then we want it to be super big. I guess it's not us, it's the people who sell it to us. And then of course, application isolation. So you've got your work apps that are in, a separate, again, sandbox space, which again, you break out of it. Which I'm always really surprised. Again, it's kind of a business thing that it's you talk to business people and they're man, I used to be such a fan of that good or that this or what have you. And then then they're but then I heard that you could pull the data straight out of memory, with an exploit. And it's yeah, somebody spoke about that at Black Hat 5 years ago. But that's, I guess, our problem as a security industry is that I guess we have a PR problem that people, yeah, we talk about it at our security conferences, but then it doesn't translate into, actually solving enterprise security problems. Instead, people buy 2 phones or try and build a safer phone. And then, again, people are all right, let's make some money off of this. Let's basically make a firewall. for mobile. So mobile device management was born. But really, the whole point of mobile device management, I realize, again, this like from a business perspective, is because people had room in their budget for a BlackBerry Bez, the BlackBerry Enterprise server. So when the BlackBerry Enterprise server went away, they had like this line item. So this mobile device management basically came in to take that budget. But basically the idea was provisioning, making it so that people could get their email on their phone and what have you without having to take it down to IT and take time out of their day. So really, to this day, these things are typically bought by operations. They're not bought by security. So their security features are always going to be kind of like a second tier thing comparatively. And it was shown as the case, because while these would in varying amounts and to this day have security features, they would generally be pretty terrible. You get like root detection that looks for on iPhone the Cydia app, which if you jailbreak your phone yourself, you totally get the Cydia app, because that's typically packaged with your self-rooting and jailbreaking. On the Android side, it's super user. But if you were a bad guy and you want to take over somebody's phone, get root level access, start exfiltrating data, not get noticed, like the last thing you would possibly want is a third-party app store. I mean, they're really like overestimating these people here. I mean, underestimating. But okay, we're almost done. So like I said, basically they had a name issue, and they had gotten some flack again, like in the security community and whatnot, from people saying this stuff doesn't really provide security. So they rebranded themselves as Enterprise Mobility Management, and now we do all these things, like we have a corporate app store, and we can block things that are scary on the device, and blacklist and whitelist apps, and all sorts of like scary stuff. But of course we can still provision things, so we can still make it so that you can get on the Wi-Fi and get your email without having to go to IT, which again was really the whole point. And again, these are still bought by ops, so that's really what they want. They really want to know what devices are here and be able to get them on the network. Again, there's varying degrees of security capabilities. I mean, really the problem that I see is with the vulnerability assessment in mobile now is that they typically talk to these guys and say, okay, tell me the state of security, which, since this guy's job is to secure mobility, if you ask it whether mobility is secure, that's like asking the night watchman who slept all night, like whether anybody broke in. So, that's my problem with that. But I mean, a lot of people have these things, certainly. I mean, it's a line item. It's been around since the Bez. But like I said, the gold standard right now is kind of mobile application management, either as part of a bigger enterprise mobility management or as a separate thing, which is the idea that your corporate apps live in a separate sandbox from your personal apps, so they're not able to communicate with each other, and thus, the idea is if there's a malicious app in your personal device, it will not be able to get into the sandbox, which certainly is kind of a ridiculous idea. But my mom's online games, it'll get the easy stuff. It'll keep the easy stuff out. The really hard stuff, the where people actually got access to whatever mobile application management system they've got and figured out a way around it and put payloads in it for that. You'll get certainly stuff able to get around it. And again, it varies by vendor, like how good they are at keeping stuff out, but there's always going to be a way around this stuff. There's no way to make it completely secure in my mind. The other problem with it is that people typically hate it. The people who built it are not typically app developers, so you get like their version of PowerPoint doesn't render stuff properly, or you get like not able to use your device properly. Like you get a meeting invite inside of your sandbox, and you're on your way to the meeting, and you click the Maps address, and it wants to go to Maps, but Maps is in your personal sandbox, so they're not able to talk to each other, and that makes people mad. And when people at the C-level get mad, security stuff tends to go away. So then you've got endpoint stuff. We've talked about this a lot already, and I'm kind of running out of time. that this is, the new antivirus, and in the worst case, it basically asks whether itself is a virus. Really, the only way to get around that would be for it to be baked, into the architecture of the mobile. I mean, you see a lot of them on the Android side. They'll like come with Lookout or something, but it's still running in user land, so it's still not really able to do what we would even expect of a traditional antivirus, which we kind of make fun of as an industry on a more traditional computer, but it can certainly do a lot more than it can do on a mobile device, where it's in a lot of cases basically just scanning itself. Most of your places that you're going to be working with in the enterprise, they've got either some kind of enterprise mobility management, a mobile application management by itself, and then some sort of endpoint protection, which isn't really solving the problem in my mind. Mobile threats revisited. Now that we've talked about the ways to stop these things, do any of the things that we just talked about, can they stop, to some extent, malicious applications? Can it stop social engineering? No, not at all. Even on the iPhone, there's this other talk I give, a more technical, not Keynote-y one, where I show using profiles, which is what the enterprise uses to provision iPhones and iOS devices. And the user just has to say yes to basically undo all of security, which is how social engineering works. So, certainly stealing the device is even more likely when they're this little. People don't put passwords on them, or they put 6969 as their password or something like that. So, in general, we have not solved the mobile risk problem. It's even bigger than the traditional device problem, and we have completely failed to fix it by basically just retrofitting stuff that almost worked on traditional devices. So naturally, I would say this because I'm a penetration tester, but what's missing is monitoring the risk, doing that vulnerability assessment, penetration testing, whatever you want to call it, to find out, one, what your mobile risks are, because they really are going to vary from enterprise to enterprise, because nobody really has the same mobile infrastructure these days. Even though it's 10 years old, it's still kind of this new thing. So those things that we can fix, we can fix them, find out what our problems are and fix them. And if we're not able to fix them completely, put some kind of additional mitigation, like a better version of one of these guys, to mitigate that risk. And then we're seeing a lot more continuous monitoring, certainly, in just the vulnerability assessment space and penetration testing in general, with the traditional devices. But a lot of times, you get people who do, their assessment once, they run, whatever product once, they have the consultants come in and do the pen test once, and that's their standard for the security, and then they come back a year later and you fixed all those problems, but you've literally not patched since, which is not generally good. So it's even worse with mobile because it's changing so rapidly. People are getting so many different devices. I don't know about you, but I kind of have a shared workspace, and we've always got a lot of fun toys around, and they're all internet enabled. The TV is online, all the toys are online, all the since I do IoT testing, I have literally everything. Those meeting schedulers are great. I'm going to do a talk right about them next spring. But anyway, so the point being, somebody drops their phone in the toilet, they get a new phone. Your risk profile of your enterprise has changed between Friday and Monday because they're bringing in that new device, which has a different risk profile. You see that, even with the same device, say it's whatever this is, a couple versions back of the Galaxy, and you get somebody who bought it at Best Buy, somebody who bought it straight from AT&T, somebody who bought it off eBay used. You've got 3 devices that in the enterprise mobility management look exactly the same as this device X at this version of Android at this baseband level, etc. In terms of what apps they come with, what nasties they're already got on there, it's very different per device. So this is something you absolutely need to do all the time. in terms of like rinse and repeat, because like I said, you're just gonna get more and more different devices, and it's really scary. And yeah, so that's about it, I guess. So like I said, there's like no cards. I suck, but I have theoretically some of my information up there. I can't read it, but hopefully you guys can. Like, there's my Twitter and an email address for me. And I know my company name is really hard to spell and say, but it seemed like a good idea at the time, and nobody's come up with anything better to change it with. So yeah, so welcome to my security nervous breakdown. Let's do it all over again. So yeah, I guess like the big picture thing is like mobility is scary, and cloud is mobility, and it's just gonna get worse, and we're gonna have to do something about it, and we've really gotta do better security testing around devices that we're basically ignoring, because literally penetration testing and vulnerability assessment is all but ignoring these devices and just going after your workstations and servers. And that's no good for the state of security. So go buy the book or silent auction the book. So I couldn't throw it at you guys' heads. This probably wouldn't be good. So who's after me?